Hey folks, you are listening to Screen Watching. It's our weekly deep dive into the things what we've been watching on the screen. On this week's program, we ask maybe the most fundamental question of American cinema in 2022. What the hell happened to Robert Zemeckis?
It's not like TV, only better.
Television! Teacher, mother!
Secret lover. What, that's it? That's your movie?
Well, I said that I had an idea for a movie.
The podcast for tax reasons we call Screen Watching. My name, it's Dan Barrett. That's for legal reasons. And for stage reasons, we introduce Simon Foster.
Good morning, Dan Barrett. Good morning, everyone. Yes, unless I owe you money, I'm Simon Foster, and it's good to be here and to talk to you. And yes, that's a great opening. What the hell did happen to Robert Zemeckis? I nearly said Rodriguez. Robert Zemeckis. We'll be addressing that in our review of Pinocchio a little bit later. But boy, what a week.
Do you know why you said Robert Rodriguez? And I said that in the intro that I had to re-record. The reason we said that is because Robert Zemeckis has not been a vital or relevant filmmaker now for about 20 odd years, despite the fact he's got a pretty heavy output. But we'll talk about that later in the show, shall we?
Let's talk more later, yeah, for sure. Very sad week. We farewell Basia Bonkowski, who was a big deal back in the 80s. She was and became a very successful television producer. Basia was the front person of the early era of music television and championed Australian bands. So farewell Basia Rendell. She married what was the band he was in? Hoodoo Gurus, I think he was in, Kimball Rendell, and then he went on to be a bit of a filmmaker himself. So all the best to Kimball and farewell Basia. Very sad.
Yeah, I interviewed her she was the executive producer of RBT, which is one of those reality shows where they put cops out on the street and then film hapless strangers as they go up and have the worst night of their year. Anyway, she was very charming and funny. It was a phone interview, so I got to meet her in face to face, but I liked her.
Yeah, very big deal. And we should also mention, we've had a huge response to a new segment I'm calling The Birthday Quiz. Every week, early in the week, I'm going to put a Facebook post up which shows all 4 of our birthday types, and you have to guess what the connection is, and you have to listen to the podcast to hear what the answer to our quiz question is. So that's very exciting. We've got 4 actor types today. I won't go into it, but go to the Facebook page, have a look, have a guess, and we'll get the answer a little bit later on. It's like old-fashioned AM radio contest.
Yeah, look, everybody's talking about it. I know that just this morning I had a conversation with Simon. I'm like, hey, Simon, what's this?
I know. Mr. Albanese commented on it. We've had the UN Secretary General join in on the birthday quiz. It's been a very busy week for us.
Boutros Ghali got out of retirement to have a chat about it. Has he passed
still
away?
Is he still with us, Boutros? Well, in terms of passing away, I mean, there was Basia, but then there was one other old lady who passed away this week, God bless her, and that got a lot of media coverage as well.
Who was... I don't know. You tell me afterwards, so I'll figure it out. Maybe. We'll see. Hey, Simon, something we do on the show here is that we review things.
Sure.
We talk about the things that we have been watching.
Yep.
So shall we start that segment?
It stinks.
Okay, Simon, there are 2 very big Pinocchio movies being released this year. There's one that's debuted this week on Disney Plus, and then there's one that people actually want to see, which is debuting on Netflix later this year. However, we're not talking about that just yet. We're talking about the one that's debuted on Disney Plus. Simon, tell me about Pinocchio.
Pinocchio now represents 2 significantly symbolic lines in the sand for the Walt Disney Company. In 1940, the cartoon, which was produced by Walt, but apparently directed by a team of animators who were each assigned sort of key sequences, it landed in cinemas an instant classic, along with films like Snow White and Dumbo and Fantasia. It represents the might of the Mouse House at the height of their creative commitment to wondrous, heartfelt movie magic. And now we get to 2022, and Robert Zemeckis' Pinocchio is not any of those things. On the surface, it's the latest live-action CGI hybrid that the Disney boardroom have deemed an intellectual property up for a reboot, a legacy title that they thought may be nearing its expiry date after 80 years stocking the commercial coffers of the studio, and now the money men have decided needed a new coat of paint. And the result, in line with most creative undertakings born out of greed, is horrible. Directed by Robert Zemeckis, and we'll get to him a little bit later. Pinocchio is a shockingly soulless, cynically constructed slab of modern streaming content. It is a monumental testament to bad creative decision-making. From the moment the cuckoo clocks on the wall of Geppetto's workshop chime and a parade of Disney characters emerge, this travesty ironically abandons any pretense it will take on anything resembling human form. Zemeckis draws on his old mate Tom Hanks, the pair working together for the umpteenth time, hoping to recapture that Forrest Gump vibe, but more often recalling the Polar Express in everything they do. He plays Geppetto, the latest character in his 2022 tour of weird accents. See also Baz Luhrmann's Elvis for that. Why he bothers going con the fruiterer, full con the fruiterer, is hard to fathom. As Joseph Gordon-Levitt,
Couple of days.
And Joseph Gordon-Levitt as an annoying Jiminy Cricket. He's all Louisiana drawl. And the young actor who plays Pinocchio himself, a guy called Benjamin Evan Ainsworth, he sounds like Bobby Brady through the whole thing. Other casting is either focus group driven, such as Cynthia Erivo as the Blue Fairy, who's fine, I guess, or totally in line with memos from the boardroom. I could imagine someone writing, hey, Beauty and the Beast, Luke Evans is still on the book, so find something for him. Now let's get to Zemeckis. By my reckoning, and I want to be full disclosure here, I've been a fan of Zemeckis since his script for Spielberg's 1941 and his 1980 directorial debut, Used Cars. Don't mention 1941. You know how much I love it. I can see you. I can see you revving up.
Simon mentioned 1941. Drink.
There is no sadder figure amongst the top-tier Hollywood directing ranks, having helmed 4 legit classics, Back to the Future, Forrest Gump, Roger Rabbit, and Contact, and one black comedy which has emerged as a real cult favorite, that was Death Becomes Her.
I'd like to also drop in for your consideration, I Want to Hold Her Hand.
Absolutely. These are films that found the perfect balance between new Hollywood tech and storytelling, and he has chased that dragon over and over since. His unwavering fascination with the potential of filmmaking technology has resulted in an ambitious but irredeemably flawed series of films that favor gadgetry over humanity. Films like Beowulf, Polar Express, Christmas Carol, and what up until now was his worst film, The Walk. And Pinocchio is his worst yet. The story of the boy who wants to be real becomes a contradictory, even cautionary tale about bringing life to the lifeless can go terribly, terribly wrong. This is a travesty.
Okay.
There you go. So that's me watching it, so you didn't have to.
And this is the thing, like, as with yourselves, Zemeckis, I think, is maybe one of the most important filmmakers of the 80s and 90s. Where he lost me a little bit, like, I guess where I fell off the Zemeckis train was that movie, What Lies Beneath. That was Michelle Pfeiffer and Harrison Ford as, it was kind of a ghost story, marital breakdown story.
Murder mystery thing, yeah.
Murder mystery. So I'd seen the trailer for that movie. I went down and watched the movie. And as I watched the movie, I was like, oh, wait a sec. The entire film is leading up to a massive plot twist, which was in the trailer. And apparently that's the thing that Zemeckis believed, which is that no one should ever walk into a movie surprised by what they're going to see. And I'm thinking, you've just made a movie where it's entirely hinging on a plot twist reveal. Like, surely that's the entire experience that you're trying to cultivate here. But, you know, didn't really care about that. So I sat there, watched the movie. I was on a first date. And, you know.
There's something about that period where the digitalization of film took over. And he saw that kind of both intrigued him, but also left him behind. He wants to try and master this new toy that Hollywood's playing with. After making these beautiful shot on films, classic bits of early digital era films like Gump and Contact and certainly Roger Rabbit.
Contact, one of the all-time greats.
Yeah, exactly. And then he just became this, I don't want to say hack, because I think he has ambitions. I think I know what he wants to make, but he's never been able to master it. And it's so sad because he's such a talented filmmaker, but he seemed to have lost touch with his talent, certainly with regards to Pinocchio. I mean, the bucks they must have thrown at him to make this and to bring on board all the whiz-bangery that he works with proved obviously too much for him to say no to, and it's a slight on his constantly sort of downward trajectory career. Very sad, because I am a big fan. 1941, there, I said it again.
Yeah, I've always just kind of assumed, and like I don't actually know that much about him and his artistic muse in the world, but it just struck me that he's always been someone who's been interested in being a technician, like a Hollywood technician. Okay, there's a lot of tools. Like you look at the Back to the Future movies, for example, like they really established a lot of special effects that got used in many films that followed. Who Framed Roger Rabbit is probably the sterling example of this one, the gold standard.
Yep.
Okay, which is, obviously having to pioneer a lot of new technology. And I get the feeling he's just more interested in the technology than he is the rest of the craft. And so that's interesting. And so I kind of feel as though maybe he should have stepped more into a hands-on producer, like emeritus sort of a role, rather than continuing to direct movies, because it doesn't feel like his passion's entirely there.
Yeah. Totally agree.
Yeah.
You were able to see a new show called Wedding Season, also on Disney Plus.
It was pretty easy. I just pressed the button on the screen. It just came up. So, Simon, Wedding Season, is this a show that you'd even heard of up until this very moment?
Nope.
No. Okay, fair enough. So this is a program that was created by a guy named Oliver Littleton. It was made for Star. And this is the first UK Star production, and for those who are in the US, Star is a subsection of Disney Plus that we have around the rest of the world. So this was, as they launched Star in international markets, they needed to produce content for it, and they commissioned, from memory, and this is going back a good sort of year or so from when I reported this in my newsletter, alwaysbewatching.com, sign up today. I think it was about 10 series that initially commissioned for the UK market. This is the very first one. It's a romantic comedy thriller. How many romantic comedy thrillers have you seen in your life, Simon? Not a lot.
It's an odd one. Yeah, it's a strange sort of thing. Into the Night, Jeff Goldblum and Michelle Pfeiffer is one of my favorite romantic comedy thrillers. But yeah, it's a small subgenre.
Yeah, I mean, there's I guess maybe like the 80s, early 90s had a few entries in this. So I'm thinking about like the classic Bird on a Wire starring Mel Gibson and Goldie Hawn.
I Love Trouble with Julia Roberts and Nick Nolte.
I never saw that.
Oh, it's quite a piece of filmmaking.
I've always had an aversion to Nick Nolte. I don't know why.
You and the rest of the world, jeez.
Is it just me? I don't know. It seems like Nick Nolte had a time.
Yeah, he was always a fine actor. We've been sidetracked. Please talk about Wedding Season.
We have. I mean, almost purposefully so. So look, this isn't necessarily a bad program. Like the premise of it is that you've got this guy who, on a day that he's proposed to this woman, proposed marriage to a woman where the relationship's going south quickly because he's a bit of a romantic at heart. And, he wants to love. He wants to be loved. His relationship's going south. He's, flailing around desperately trying to find a way to salvage it. Proposes marriage. She immediately just cottons on to what this is, which is a last-ditch effort. And she's like, dude, no way is this happening. So she dumps him. And then he's, we'll say at a shindig, ends up meeting like this other woman who she falls into the category of, remember the Manic Pixie Dream Girl? Remember how that was a really big thing for a while?
The whole Zooey Deschanel kind of, that sort of thing. Yep.
In the same way that the romantic comedy thriller is a subsection of the romantic comedy and the thriller, a bit of a subsection of the Manic Pixie Dream Girl is the psychotic Pixie Dream Girl.
Sure.
Okay, so this is the sort of character that you found in programs like Don't Trust the Bee in Apartment 23.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so, just really unhinged, but also just, who can not be wildly attracted to them at the same time.
Sort of like the wacky version of Single White Female, that kind of
a little
angle.
bit.
Yeah, a little bit like that.
Yeah,
I know what you're saying.
And these characters are always uber confident, both in terms of just general interpersonal behavior, like always hugely sexually confident. Like these are big characters in every possible way.
Sure.
So he's at this wedding. Here's the thing. I don't actually remember if they were at a wedding, if it was just a party. I'm not sure. But anyway, they're at this event. He proposes marriage. She dumps him. He meets this woman later in the evening and he just falls for her immediately. It's love at first sight. Okay. And here's where I suddenly where the series came alive for me, which is the casting of this woman. So the guy is played by this British guy named Gavin Dreyer. And then you got this woman who she is so familiar on screen. And I'm watching her and I'm like, who on earth is this woman? Like, she's a bit odd looking, a little bit. Like, she's got a bit of odyssey. She's not like a classic TV movie beauty. Okay, like attractive lady, please don't get me wrong in this, but not exactly who you're looking for. But she seems so familiar and I could not pick her. then I got onto this thing called the Internet Movie Database. You may have heard of it.
I know of it, yes.
Yeah. Rosa Salazar. And the reason why I knew her but didn't know her is because I've seen her in what seems to have been her specialty, much in the same way as that gentleman from the Lord of the Rings movies, who I can never remember the name of.
Andy Serkis.
Andy Serkis really sort of built his career off doing motion capture for the Lord of the Rings films and the Planet of the Apes movies and a whole bunch of other films. She's kind of had a very similar career early on, where she was the star of Lisa Battle Angel. If you remember seeing that, she played a computer animated character in a live action world. It's very Robert Zemeckis in a lot of ways.
Very Robert Zemeckis.
Robert Rodriguez.
Exactly right. It's come full circle, yes.
Really has. And then also she was the star of a really amazing Amazon series called Undone.
Undone is where I know it from.
Yeah, definitely check that out. And she is very much the star of that. Anyway, she has an amazing screen presence. And then suddenly I was watching in real life and I'm like, who is this woman? Like, she's got presence. I just couldn't really place where I knew her from. That's how I know her.
But anyway, not a British actress, I should say. Not a British actress. She's an American actress in this British show. Is that how it's worked out?
Well, she's a Latina woman.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so anyway, you've got that. So meets her, wackiness is sure to ensue. And the wackiness in question happens to be that we're dealing with a split timeline. And in the future incarnation of the series, we're seeing some police that are interrogating the guy because they believe that he may have murdered a whole bunch of people at the wedding of the Rosa Salazar character, Katie. There's a sequence where it's very Red Wedding-like, where she's sitting there at like the wedding reception, like on one of those sort of dais tables, like at the front there.
Yeah.
Everyone around her is dead. Everyone in the audience is dead. And
well, that took a turn. I wasn't expecting that.
Exactly. We're left to wonder who murdered all of these people. Was it Katie? Was it Stefan, the main guy in it? Was it Katie's ex-husband? Like, we don't know who it is. And that's the thrust of the series. It's the murder mystery, but also the, sparks will fly, tension, romantic comedy between Stefan and Katie.
You've actually sold me on this. I was sort of, mumbling along with you, trying to get interest out of this show, but I am hooked now. This is something I want to check out.
Yeah. So it's a really interesting idea. It's just that you watch the execution of it and it just kind of feels just overly familiar. It's kind of like the Rosa Salazar of TV comedies. It's like, this is an original idea. Like, I've never heard this as a premise for a series before by any means. Okay. But at the same time, like all the beats in it just kind of feel a little bit familiar. And I don't want to say it's sort of execution dependent, but like it's certainly weighed down by the execution to a certain degree. And also, I will say, certainly weighed down by Gavin Dreyer as the lead of the series. I kind of feel like he may be a perfectly competent actor. I just don't know that he's necessarily a rom-com lead.
Very funny that you mentioned this young lady as we record this. I was scanning Facebook, as old men do, and came across a post from John Landau, the producer of Avatar, as you know.
And Avatar 2, The Way of Water, out in cinemas on 16th of December 2022. Go for it.
Exactly. And
97 days to go as we record.
But he posted on his Facebook page a full-page color ad in today's Los Angeles Times by a group who is building a petition to get a sequel to Alita Battle Angel.
I'm actually surprised that there hasn't been a sequel to that.
Oh, there was clearly meant to be. It finished on a note that suggested there had to be a sequel, but it's so underperformed at the box office that I think it was shelved. And Fox were going through their whole Disney sellout kind of thing. So it became less of a property.
Yeah, I do feel if it wasn't Fox, I kind of feel that might have been a thing where they pushed it out for a second sequel, maybe retooled it a little bit to have a bit of a new way into it. But it kind of struck me as something which had so much fan support behind it that I kind of think that some savvy executive would have looked at it going, there's actually maybe some way we can actually build this into a franchise from where we're at.
These fans are now buying full color page ads in the LA Times to try and get this off the ground. So there's certainly a groundswell there. Who knows? But to get back to wedding season, I'm kind of hooked. I like her. This sounds like an interesting premise. If I can get past the shortcomings that you mentioned, I'm going to check this out over the weeks ahead.
Yeah, was John Landau a producer on Alita? Like, I presume he was. So it was originally something that James Cameron had been working for, decades to try to get up. So he was a producer on the film.
Yep.
And John Landau obviously has produced the Avatar films and other Cameron joints over the years. So I presume
think they're all intertwined. I think they all work together. But yeah, you're right. Landau's got an interesting Facebook feed and sort of social media presence. He's often posting behind the scenes stuff. Well, look at me telling you about Avatar. You're the Avatar guy. Are you getting any more excited? Is it building any more sort of groundswell of support for this sequel?
Can I ask a question? How can you get more excited? Essentially, it's kind of like you got a jug of water and you filled it up to the top.
Sure.
You can't put more water in that jug.
What is it with you and water? Water, the way of water. Oh, I see. You tied that all together with the sequel. That's some good podcasting right there.
Well, James Cameron also has had a lifelong interest in water.
Yeah. Do you play that game where you got to guess the frame from a film every week? There's a few of those that came up, and it came up this week, and they started with some underwater things, and I instantly recognized it as Cameron, but I guessed The Abyss when it was actually Titanic, but I got it on second go.
Yeah, so you're talking about the very popular online game called Framed, which you can find at framed.wtf.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big fan of this game. I play it on a regular basis, even though they've been repeating a couple of things lately, which I'm not so enthused by. But I didn't pick Avatar for a couple of frames because I was thinking it was like some sort of far off futuristic thing, and I was seeing it not as water. I was seeing it as like haze. So I was thinking like your Blade Runners and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, right. Yeah, no, he's got that thing with headlights underwater where it goes out through the... and I went Abyss first of all because I thought it was the Michael Bean. I'm getting sidetracked. We're in the review segment. Let's
anyone who doesn't get today's frame from the very first frame, like I just don't know what you're doing listening to this podcast, frankly.
Okay, let's move on. I had a look at a Sylvester Stallone movie that's bounced around quite a few release schedules, actually. It's called Samaritan.
Okay, tell me about this one, Simon.
All right, Sylvester Stallone. He looks good for his age. And Aussie director Julius Avery, he's a fairly exciting visualist who uses framing and color in a way that recalls Todd Phillips' Joker, actually. But in every other respect, Samaritan is a pretty rote sort of fallen superhero adventure that was bound for the big screen. It went from MGM to Universal here in Australia, then back to MGM, but it feels about right as a streaming debut. Sly plays Joe, a garbo on the dirty streets of dank metropolis Granite City, desperate to remain in the shadows of whatever anonymous life he can make for himself. But he shares an apartment complex with a pesky brat called Sam Cleary, who played by pretty good Yvonne Walton from Euphoria. This kid's become increasingly convinced Joe is, in fact, the once mighty superhero Samaritan, a legendary figure who was forced out of the masked, cape-wearing lifestyle after a reputation-ruining family incident with his evil brother, Nemesis. The two are thrown together eventually over a shared adversary in the form of Cyrus, played by Game of Thrones' Pillow Ajbek. He's the stereotypically snarling local gang lord who yearns to be the badass bad guy that Nemesis once was. From here on in, the story mostly writes itself. Sam become leverage. Joe is drawn out of hiding. Joe, Sam, and Cyrus face off in a fiery climax. It's all superhero bluster 101, excuse me, sometimes recalling Arnie's Last Action Hero, minus the ironic laughs, and a few genre staples along the way, like Sophia Tatum's cold-blooded hot killer, Syl, or Martin Starr's bookstore owner, exposition portal Albert, are thrown into the mix. I think Julius Avery has a great film in him waiting to break out. And if you believe some corners of the internet, it already happened with 2018's bloody World War II horror romp Overlord. And it might also have been Samaritan at some point, as there is some social commentary material in its DNA that addresses things like rich versus poor inequality and family legacy. But that all sort of fails to materialize. It all sort of pushed to the side. This favors loud and fast over character and nuance, which will be fine for some, but I think represents a bit of a missed opportunity for others. So it's okay. It's a good watch for an Amazon title and maybe worth checking out on a rainy Sunday afternoon if you're a Sly fan.
So I was going to come to the party and just say that I haven't seen Samaritan yet, even though it stars upcoming Tulsa King's lead actor, Sylvester Stallone.
Yes, I'm very excited about the new Taylor Sheridan. I am all over that.
Well, Taylor Sheridan's producing it, but it's actually a Terrence Winter joint, which I'm very enthused by. He's a gentleman who used to be a writer on The Sopranos. You may have heard of it.
Oh, I know.
Also, he was the lead creative on Boardwalk Empire, and he knows his way around a mob drama.
Sure, that sounds interesting.
But anyway, I was going to say Overlord. If people haven't seen this one, it's a World War II monster movie. And huge fun, really visually dynamic.
It's very cool, and very bloody, and shows that this guy is a director. He did an Aussie film being Australian, of course he did. But Ewan McGregor and Alicia Vikander in Son of a Gun a few years ago, which was a really tough sort of street crime drama shot here in Australia. It's very good. He's a really fine director, but this film has just gone through too many boardrooms, had too many hands on it. It's lost any of that touch. And while there's bits in it that show what a cool director he can be, it's not going to be remembered as one of his finest efforts.
Yeah, so sorry, I just want to get back to Overlord because, how could I not? So I interviewed Julius Avery when he was doing the promo round for that. And I had this really just strange interview where he was it was one of these sort of cattle call things where, you're going in after like the previous journo who had 7 minutes with them and going through it. But it was basically him sitting on a chair next to Pillow Azabak, who we know from Game of Thrones and also Overlord. And the two of them, the two of them clearly get along very well, and they're a little bit sort of, schoolboyish and, just sort of joking around a bit. And it was just a bit hard. The energy in that room was just a bit weird.
Sounds fun. Fun. Yeah, look, do see Overlord.
Just as a bit of a, push for it. While Avery may be the director of it, the screenplay was from Mark L. Smith, who people know as the writer of films like Revenant, and also recently did The Midnight Sky, which I think is a really underrated George Clooney end of the world film that I thought was generally pretty good. Yeah.
Okay.
Also, Billy Ray was a writer. I think it was originally a story by Billy Ray that ended up being adapted.
A fine writer who did still the best Hayden Christensen film with what was that called? Shattered, about the journalist.
Shattered Glass,
yeah, with Peter Sarsgaard in his best work as well.
I mean, I would say that Billy Ray's finest writing was on the AMC ad with Nicole Kidman sitting in an empty cinema, but that's just me. He wrote that.
It had a script?
Yeah. He wrote that.
Hey, you got to pay the bills somehow, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so. Hey, Simon, we should probably move on and talk about season 6 of The Good Fight. Okay, so Simon, generally on the show, I've got a policy where I don't review returning series because people have got the idea. The Good Fight, I can't not talk about it because I'm just obsessed with the program.
Yes, you
but
are.
I want to talk something very specifically about it. Okay, first of all, if you don't know The Good Fight, it's a legal drama. Basically, they take the issues of the day and work it into various storylines.
Go back and throw a dart at one of our old podcasts and you'll hear something. Yeah.
So I quite like the show. I think that it's very funny. I think that when they're talking about the modern day issues, I think they have a really smart, savvy way into it. I don't think they're necessarily 100% right in their approach every time, but, people are welcome to disagree and stuff. And it's good. I think that they're good conversation starters and really come at like an interesting sort of swath of issues on a regular basis in a way that tickles me every week when I watch it. Also see Evil. Now, they've got season 6 of the show coming, and this is going to be the final season of the show. And this is what I wanted to talk about, which is that when you've got a show that you love dearly, which is how I feel about The Good Fight, seeing that a show's coming to an end, like your immediate sensation is to feel a little bit sad. It's like, oh, this thing that I really like is going away. But in having watched the first couple of episodes of the new season, which returns to Australian screens in a couple of hours as we record this, but in the US, I think it's been a couple of hours since we've seen the first one. SBS On Demand have it locally, Paramount Plus overseas. When you see the last season coming, I have to say, watching it, I kind of see the cracks appearing in the series, and I understand from a creative reason why Robin and Michelle King, the showrunner creators of the series, I kind of understand why they want to bring it to an end, which is that this is a series which launched back in 2018? No, that can't be right. 6 seasons. 2016, 2017. Okay, it was originally a spin-off from The Good Wife, and they took the character of Diane Lockhart, who was a strident feminist character, but also very moneyed, very, upper echelon social class sort of a woman, very well respected within legal circles as well, spun her off into her own series. Now, you've got a character like that who immediately I think is maybe a little bit hard to relate to for the average person. But where I think the show really had a very fortuitous happenstance of when it launched is it happened to launch exactly as Trump ended up winning the presidency of the United States.
Oh, yes.
So when the show opened, they end up scrapping what they'd originally planned for the series and instead like really doubled down on the Trump of it all. So this is a series that focused on the changing norms of the United States in terms of culture changing in terms of what was perceived as truth and lies, and how essentially the George Costanza lie of it's not a lie if you believe it. Like that's very much the Trump way of life. And because this is dealing with the law, like the legal profession, an industry which is based very much on these are the rigid laws and the rules of which things are played. And anytime that you adjust that has to be based on the precedent of previous rules. Suddenly you've got this president who's coming by, one of the key sort of legal decision makers in the United States, well, at least influences, doesn't necessarily directly create law himself, but has the ability to have a huge amount of sway on what is truth, what isn't, which in turn has the ramifications on the legal industry. So the shows play around with that a fair bit. It used Diane as a bit of an avatar for the audience. She's like kind of like an audience surrogate, maybe less than an avatar. And she's there to really talk about the frustration that a lot of people were having about that corruption of truth and norms. So like that's been a core part of the series. When Trump ended up leaving office, obviously Trumpism didn't really go away. So a lot of the things that he introduced into American society are still like playing through culture quite heavily. The ramifications are reverberating through quite heavily. And the show never backed away from it. It didn't sort of think it's rainbows and sunshine from this point in just because there's Trump around. Like it really played around with like post-Trump, what does it feel like? But you get a few years away from that. And then suddenly it kind of feels like the show's mission statement just kind of feels a little bit, it's not like it's absent, but it certainly feels like it's less prescient than it had been. And for a show which I think thrives on prescience, this is a series that I wouldn't say it felt directionless, but I do think with Diane Lockhart as the lead character, suddenly the show didn't really have as much sort of lock onto, because you can only have Diane being frustrated at the lack of truth in the world so much before it kind of feels like you're replaying the hits. And there's certainly stuff happening in the show which feels very fresh and like vital, but it's not really happening with Diane. It's happening with some of the supporting cast characters as it's going around, particularly some of the like much younger cast. So as I go into this final season of The Good Fight, I'm still enjoying the heck out of it, but also it does feel like this is probably time to say goodbye to it. So it's a finale that's coming probably at the exact right time.
I would make two comments on that. I'm wondering where the Kings go now, because they have always made films which speak directly to made series that speak directly to the times and the issues of the time, whether it's, you know, Brain Dead or what was the one where they were stuck in their apartments, the Bite?
That would be, oh gosh, what's the name of it?
Was it The Bite? I think
Bite.
it was The Bite, yeah.
Yeah.
And in further to that, the fact that Trump and his brand of politics is kind of coming around again, or gaining momentum again, leading into the midterms and leading into the next presidential election. You know, one can't help but think that they're going to have a lot more to say. So I'm keen to see where that output will come, where they will find that voice.
Well, that's exactly the thing. So, I mean, I can tell you where they're at the moment, which is that, sorry, there was a really good interview in, I think, the Hollywood Reporter the other day. I think so. I put it in the Always Be Watching newsletter, which you can find at alwaysbewatching.com. But there's a interview where they talked about the fact that they're going to continue on with Evil for a couple more seasons. And that show, like, I'd be surprised if that show's got more than another 2 seasons in it. It just kind of feels like narratively they're heading in a very specific direction with it. This most recent season kind of just took the veil off exactly what they've been doing for the last couple of seasons. If you're not watching Evil, which I know you're not, Simon, you've seen some episodes, but Simon, get on this show. Like, it is so much your bag.
Oh, I know. And the ones I've seen, I've loved, as I've mentioned before. But I like the King stuff. I love Brain Dead. I absolutely binged Brain Dead beginning to end. So,
but in this interview, they do say that the idea of they were doing CBS dramas on broadcast TV of 22 episodes a year, and they just found it was too much. They thought that story-wise, a TV show can't actually support that many episodes every year. It probably needs to actually be like 10, 13 to really sort of be focused. So their idea was to scale back and just do some producing with other people doing the heavy lifting, show running. But then they kind of got into The Good Fight and then started getting onto a bit of a role with that and then launched Evil. So they were producing 22 episodes of TV a year, even though, you know, that was what they're trying to get away from. But the joke of it was that they're saying that as soon as we finish this interview, we're actually heading to CBS to pitch them on another show. And what I'm hoping, and this isn't what they say in the interview, but this is kind of just how I feel about what I've been doing, which is, as I said, The Good Fight doesn't really feel as vital as it once did, only because it's framed through Diane Lockhart and her position in life. But I do think there's a lot of energy around some of the younger actors in the show, like the Marissa character, the Carmen character. There's something there that still feels really, really just. I'm going to drop the word prescient again. Like it's connected to something that's going on in the world that I kind of think there's an opportunity to take those characters off and do something else with them, whether it's a legal drama or something else on the margins of the law. There's a possibility to do something. So I'd kind of like to see maybe another spin-off focused on those guys and take that through. But whether that's what I got planned or whether it's something which is a far off different idea, we'll see.
The Good Fight, SBS On Demand here in Australia, and sorry, where in the US?
Paramount Plus.
Paramount Plus in the US, which I don't think it'll bring to the end our coverage of The Good Fight. You do love talking about The Good Fight, but you speak so eloquently and so knowledgeably about the series. I'm excited.
If I don't talk about the final episode on this podcast, it'd be pretty surprising.
Yeah, that's very true. I'm in the middle of watching a new docu-series, I think is the term, on Disney Plus, called Welcome to Wrexham. Haven't fully prepped a review for this.
Can you say that on the podcast?
What's that?
Wrexham?
Wrexham, we bloody killed him. No, it's a docu-series that features
Wrexham? I barely knew her.
What's his name? Ryan Reynolds, and who we all know, of course, and Rob McElhenney, who I didn't really know, but I understand is on Always Sunny in Philadelphia, as he mentions over and over again in this series. I haven't seen it. So they decide, rather at a whim, to buy a football club, a UK football club called Wrexham, which are not a Premier League top-tier club. They're actually in the first level of the National League, which is the first level of the semi-professional league. They were once a club of some note. They were one of the oldest clubs in the UK. They still have one of the oldest stadiums in the UK, and a huge sort of working class town following as well. So when these two Hollywood types decide to sort of swan in and buy this club and rebuild it, there's a lot of social backlash initially. But then when they do the pitch to the supporters group, they find that the township is won over by their Hollywood charms. Now, when I sort of saw this pop up on my Disney Plus carousel, as they call it, I thought this was a series. I thought, what does Reynolds need to lash onto a Ted Lasso ripoff, which is how it struck me. But it's not that at all, although maybe some of the inspiration for it being commissioned. It's actually a very sweet and very funny look at a small town putting their faith in the money and the passion of these two Hollywood types to resurrect this football club to its former glory. So as a football fan, as a Ryan Reynolds fan, I'm keen to see where this goes. It's 3 episodes in on the Disney Plus channel, and it has surprising amounts of access to the boardrooms and the meetings and the overall running of a football club, which I found interesting, and also of the society that surrounds the Wrexham Football Club and how important it is to the local community. So it has sort of a feel-good, cool runnings type thing about it, so I can see why it's on Disney. But it also has plenty of that working class foul language and bawdy humor, and Reynolds bringing all his giggly likability to it. So welcome to Wrexham. I don't think you have to be a football fan or even a Ryan Reynolds fan, because it's a feel-good show.
Yeah, sorry, you started talking about sports and I just kind of...
I know. Well, wait till we get to the middle bit. We hear you snoring in the background. But yes, I thoroughly enjoyed Welcome to Wrexham. I was surprised. I couldn't turn it off. I watched, I think it's 3 or 4 episodes in, and it works a treat.
Yeah, look, I've been pretty tempted to watch it purely because of the 2 talent involved. Simon Foster, what are we doing now?
We're stinging, and then we're middle bidding.
Sting, check. Middle bit, let's go.
Okay.
So, Simon Foster. We talked about sports. I believe that you run through this one because I'm not a believer in this, but go for it.
Okay. It's subtitled Big Sports, Big Money. You mentioned, and I was very surprised to see it in your Always Be Watching podcast. Go to alwaysbewatching.com and subscribe now. Seven and Fox
podcast. It's a newsletter, but go on.
Okay. Seven and Foxtel absolutely cracked their biggie banks earlier this week to pay a combined $4.5 billion for 7 years worth of AFL, or Australian Football League content. I hope that's right. I don't actually follow the AFL. That's a lot of coin for the Aussie market, but how does it compare to the global broadcasting landscape? So I just thought it'd be interesting. I'm hoping it'll be interesting that we have a look at the sort of money that is thrown around to bring the very best of sports broadcasting to a global audience. So do you want to weigh in on any of these? I know you're a big NFL fan.
So I actually don't think that the amount of money being spent on international sports is actually that interesting.
Don't you derail my middle bit? Oh, fine.
No, I'm going to derail it because you didn't ask me about it, and then you suddenly just dived right in. Fine. But no, I actually don't think it's that interesting because big money has always been part of these sporting leagues. It's not like this is anything particularly new. But what I think is interesting about the AFL deal, and this is something that we're seeing reverberating through with these international deals, is that we're talking about this conflict that's taking place at the moment between traditional broadcasting and online streaming. Okay, so I think it's probably safe to say at this point that scripted drama now is primarily a domain of streaming and doesn't really make that much sense on broadcast TV. Sure. And we can see this play out in the US at the moment, where NBC is rumored at the moment to be American TV is a bit weird in that you've got the sort of you've got like a network of affiliated stations who spend a certain amount of money to NBC and carry NBC programming on it. And then NBC own a certain number of stations around the country, but they don't own all of them. And it's less clear cut than it is here in Australia, where you've got pretty much all the metro areas are covered by the companies that are broadcasting them. And then you do have regional areas which have a broader contract, and you don't really find anything outside of that. It's a pretty clean industry. But in the US, basically what happens is NBC as an organization will program 3 hours of prime time and then also produce a few other shows that are sort of offers on top of that to these networks. And they carry that, but then they also carry their own programming and licensed programming and other stuff around. Okay, but they're looking at cutting one of the hours that they sell. So instead of going from 3 hours of programming a night, they're talking about 2, and that's cutting out the 10 to 11, which is traditionally a drama series. So what will end up happening on the NBC-owned stations is that you'll find the 2 hours of NBC programming, so it'll be a couple of sitcoms and a drama. And then what they'll probably do is have 10 to 10:30 will be local news. And then they'll bring the Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon down from 11:30 to 10:30.
Yep.
So that'll probably what happens there. And that's kind of like that shrinking of broadcast TV taking place because drama doesn't necessarily work so well. It's not quite the driver that it once was on broadcast. Because through the evening on broadcast, people are doing other stuff, like they're watching streaming services. They are doing some DVR watching of what they recorded earlier that evening, later in the night. Like there's just a whole bunch of things which mean that if they program another hour, it's kind of wasting their time. So bring this back to sports. If we're looking at the idea that drama is pretty much become the domain of streaming, and what's kind of left for broadcast TV is 2 main things. You've got news, and then you've got sports. Okay, news in the US, you've got local news, which is being played on TV broadcast channels, but pretty much the idea of 24/7 news is the domain of cable. And so streaming's kind of picking up the baton on that one, like you're seeing a bit more 24-hour news streaming. So CBS run a 24-hour news stream, NBC have one. I think ABC have launched one not too long ago. So all the broadcast networks have their own news investment because they've already invested in news. So it's not that much more money for them to just hire somebody to sit in front of a desk and read the news and read the same 5 or 6 stories over and over again for like 24 hours a day. They're not really doing these panel chat conversations like you find on CNN and MSNBC. That's not really there. It's kind of just more sort of straight news. But anyway, news is taken care of in regards to that. But you've got sports. And so sports is still this thing that drives a lot of deals in terms of broadcast TV and traditional cable TV, which is also losing their audience to streaming services and the like. So cable TV is kind of on its way out. Broadcast TV is on its way out, but they're holding on thanks to sports. And because it's the last thing they've got left, it means that the codes, the various sporting leagues around the world, they know they can drive maximum dollar right now because it will get paid because these cable networks, which still drive a fair bit of revenue, these broadcast networks, which still drive a fair bit of revenue, the last thing they can do to drive that revenue is sports. So they've got them over a barrel, Simon.
That is a beautiful encapsulation of where we are with the broadcast landscape and its relationship to professional sports around the world, and brings us, I think, very interestingly, to some of the dollars that are being paid by the major leagues around the world for this kind of exposure. No surprise that NFL is right out there. The National Football League in the US are across CBS, NBC, Fox, ESPN, and Amazon. And the broadcasting rights are in place for about the next 11 years, and they're upwards of US $105 billion. So that is a pretty extraordinary amount of money, and leads the global landscape of sports broadcasting payouts and paychecks. The NBA, with ABC, ESPN, and Turner Sports, they've got a 9-year deal, which is worth $24 billion. The big sort of UK football league, the Premier League, which we mentioned earlier, they're all over Sky Sports and BBC Sports, and they've got to deal with Amazon Prime, and they're into Peacock, I think, in the UK. They're talking about £4.5 billion pounds in revenue from rights deal, upwards of $10 billion in TV revenue over the next 3 years. Baseball is a $7 billion industry to the American networks, and increasingly to the international landscape as well. The Bundesliga, the German football, 4.3 billion euros across primarily the Sky Sports network, but also a global rollout. Serie A, Italian football, is 2.8 billion euro. And the big mover is cricket at the moment. The IPL, which is broadcast on Star in India, the Disney subgenre that we mentioned previously. They've got the broadcasting rights for $5.3 billion US. And it's predicted that will become one of the biggest sports in the world revenue-wise in the coming years. So we're talking pretty extraordinary money because of all the reasons that you point out there. So, boy, you made that an interesting middle bit. I do appreciate that. You're right. Reading out dollars just isn't that thrilling. But when you talk about big money and the thinking and the business behind it, I think that's a pretty amazing part of the entertainment industry.
Yeah, one data point just talking about the AFL deal in Australia is that so in Australia, the AFL, the rights to it fell to Foxtel and Channel 7. Both of them had shared rights previously. So it's kind of, they're playing around with in terms of what games they're offering and when they'll be played and that sort of thing. But the thing that's changed a little bit beyond just the dollar values that are being offered now, they managed to drive quite a bit more cash because you had in the market, Nine played a bit of an effort to get it, but not really, not enough to get it over the line. But also Paramount Global, so the international company that owns Paramount Plus and Channel 10 in Australia, the idea was that they would use the AFL to try to drive subscriptions to Paramount Plus. And so they put together a fairly comprehensive package, but weren't really quite offering as much money as what Foxtel and Seven were. But what Seven were after, particularly in this deal, was the one thing they didn't have was streaming rights. So as we move further and further away from a broadcast model, Channel 7 wanted to make sure that for the increasingly large number of homes that don't have access to broadcast TV anymore, okay, so I think about the house I was living in previously, we ended up we didn't even ask to do this. Basically, a guy came in to install the NBN one day and ended up taking out our TV aerial, connection, and I didn't notice it for about 6 months.
Oh, God.
Okay, but I didn't really need it because I could just stream whatever was on the broadcast networks through things like the 7 Plus app, for example. Okay. However, if you don't have sports rights for your 7 Plus app, it means that viewers like me would have just been lost entirely because you'd have to have alternate programming on your live feed. You can't broadcast it through that way. So all these people who are not necessarily maybe at home, but would like to be able to stream it on their phones or their tablets or, are in their home and don't have a broadcast aerial on their TV, whatever, you're just losing all these people as they start pushing that 7 Plus app as being their primary platform that they're delivering content on. So if they don't have the rights to it, that's an issue. So that was one of the things they did bundle in as part of this new rights negotiation.
And I would just also point out that at the other end of this deal, there are the codes themselves. And Australia's in a very unique position right now because unlike the US where the NFL completely dominates or an entirely different sport like baseball is part of the thinking, here in Australia, the codes are going through a real expansion and are trying to win over certain heartlands. So for this sort of money to be poured into the AFL means that they're going to be hoping to increase the profile of that sport in New South Wales and Queensland and have it grow, to build the kids playing it and the community sporting levels. The next big deal, I guess, which is on the table will be the rugby league. And they'll be doing the same thing, fighting back against the AFL's incursion into sort of, heartland rugby league communities. So there's that aspect of it, which doesn't necessarily play out in other markets around the world. So I'm keen to see how much of that money is actually pocketed by the suits and how much of it goes into community-based programs to enhance the sport and keep it going into the future. So it's a fascinating sort of side of the industry we don't touch on very often here on Screen Watching, but it's probably worth having a look at now. Good one. Thanks for that.
Sorry, I cut you off a little bit early there.
That's all right. I'd said enough.
Can I give you some breaking news?
Yeah, sure.
2 TV shows that I reviewed recently, both just got cancelled.
Yes, they did.
Do you know which ones?
Paper Girls.
Paper Girls has been cancelled, and also Maggie, which was a rom-com that I talked about a few weeks ago on this program on Disney Plus in Australia.
And
an Amazon Prime series.
And the show that I touched on a couple of weeks ago has also gone. The Resident Evil TV series has been cancelled. The axe has fallen somewhat on some of our more favoured TV shows.
Yeah, I will say I'm a little bit surprised that Paper Girls got cancelled, and I don't know what the viewing numbers were by any means or anything. I do know that Legendary Television, which have the rights to it, are going to shop it around. It got pretty good critical reviews around the place, but I regularly talk to the guy that runs the local Brisbane comic shop here, Comics Etc. Really good store. People should check it out if you're in the area. After they subscribe to my newsletter at alwaysbewatching.com. But I was talking to him, and something he'll regularly ask me is anytime there's one of these sort of big nerd properties coming out, he'll ask if I've seen the screeners for it and do I think that it's going to resonate with possible new fans, because what he needs to do is order enough books to be able to meet that demand.
Right.
So, yes, for example, Sandman the other week, which surprisingly, I thought anyone who reads comics had Sandman on their shelf because it's been a very big seller for 30 odd years now. But the other day when Netflix debuted their Sandman series, huge amount of interest in the series, in the comic. And so suddenly you can't sell enough Sandman right now. They're just flying out the store.
It's a new wave. It's the broadcast era launch of this old property has rejuvenated it.
Yeah, but he asked me about Paper Girls, and I said, look, I actually don't know on that one because it's Amazon Prime, so it's a bit hard to tell whether it'll get the traction or not. But he said that, I said it's good. I'd certainly get more copies than you think. But he said, they've been selling a buttload of them. It's just, it's been highly sought after. So, him talking about the fact that actually is resonating that way makes me surprised that the show actually is being cancelled. But, I guess the metrics are quite different to, selling some books.
Dan, I've got a question.
Yes, sir.
What else have you been watching?
Look, that's a really good question and fairly pertinent to what we do here on the podcast, I'd suggest. I've been watching a couple of things. So the thing that I thought I'd maybe talk about is Last Light. This is the new show that's debuted here on Stan. It's a Peacock series in the US. It's one of these. So this is the one that stars Matthew Fox, and it's about the collapse of society with something to do with the oil, whatever. I've made my way through most of the first episode. It's a slog. It's one of these series where it's obviously something where there's producers who've gotten some money from a few different countries, because you can see with the casting, it's set in the UK, there's Middle Eastern characters which kind of factor into the oil production, but then you got this American lead, and everyone just kind of feels like they're sort of jammed together in this one program, and none of it quite feels authentic to any sort of clear voice. It just kind of feels like this has been done to appeal to multiple markets at once.
Yep.
The whole casting of it just kind of feels a little bit off. But you've got that aspect to it. But then at the very beginning, look, I've got this friend named Dennis, really good mate of mine. And if I went to Dennis and said, Dennis, I'm going to fund your movie for you, this is what I ended up receiving from him. I would receive a film that would be, fairly competent looking, but it would be filled with his favorite visual motif that he sees in not a motif, a visual style that he sees. He's a huge fan of the, what's it called? It's a pull focus. You know when you see the person in the foreground and then the background sort of disappears?
Oh, well, Spielberg did that in Jaws with the sheriff
Yeah.
with exactly. That was his famous,
And
yeah.
Yeah, and that's a classy way of doing it. But then you just see that look in a whole bunch of just cheap movies and whatnot, where it's done for heightened effects, where suddenly the person's there in the background and suddenly comes into the foreground.
Yeah.
So look, that's an effect that can be used in a lot of classy ways, a lot of really subtle ways. But Dennis would use the most overt, gross ways of using that in every possible way because man, he loves that special effect, that visual effect. He's really into it.
I'm with
and
Dennis.
That film would be riddled with them.
Yep.
But he cuts this new TV show, Last Light, and I'm not saying that there's a lot of overt pull focus effects. But there's a opening sequence where you've got Matthew Fox, who's walking through the middle of the desert with a big sweeping drone flying around it. And you can tell, like, that's been done. Like, we don't need to see that drone shot again. Like, it's
drones.
So
don't get me started on drones. Oh my God.
You can just tell the director of it, he loves using that drone. So, like, that's in there. And then there's just all these really sort of naff special effects or visual effects at the very beginning to try to drive, like, the confusion that the Matthew Fox character is feeling. And then it cuts to 2 days prior, and then everything's a lot calmer, and it's, just telling the story as is. It just kind of feels like a production which is just a little bit all over the place. It doesn't feel like there's actually a vision behind any of it. It's just, I don't want to say it's a mess of a program, but it doesn't feel like it's a program with actual focus.
Have I
focus or otherwise
missed the boat on why Matthew Fox is kind of a big deal? Because Stan have been really promoting this all over. I'm seeing it on sides of buses, and it's kind of like they're big, and they're really touting Matthew Fox's return to broadcast television, returning to the series television. And I'm thinking, well, he had a failed movie career. He got into a bit of trouble driving drunk, and he allegedly, and he hasn't been on television for a long time. I'm thinking, who's actually hanging out for the latest Matthew Fox show?
So, look, I don't think you're entirely wrong in saying that. Okay. But also, I think what you're missing a little bit is you've got the Party of Five-ness about him.
All for that. Loved him in Party of Five.
People have such fondness for the memory of that program, okay, as well as the cast of it. I mean, look at every cast member from it. Like, all of them are beloved. They may not necessarily have, like, huge success. Like, they may not necessarily be driving people to purchase the tickets or something.
All true, yes.
But people have very strong fondness for Nev Campbell. They've got fondness for Lacey Chabert. I'm not sure what Baby Owen's up to these days. And suddenly, what's his name?
Fighting the raccoons at the dumpster behind Subway somewhere.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. But anyway, so, like, people have fondness for them. And Matthew Fox was never really, like, the lead of that series by any means, but he was always present and people liked him for that. But then Lost came around.
Sure.
And, like, he was beloved from Lost. And Lost is definitely one of the biggest TV show hits of, ever.
Yeah. I get all of that. I get that he's a name. I just don't know if he's the name to sort of pitch your whole series on.
I don't know what his Q scores are, like the scores that they use to determine whether or not someone's popular.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know what they are, but I suspect they're probably pretty high.
Sure. Yeah, fair enough.
And so I think sort of based on that, I think also I get the feeling that people generally like him. I think that as a person, like, he's really easy to work with. I think that he's generally a benefit sort of, behind the scenes. I think he takes good meetings. I think there's a lot of industry goodwill for him. Okay, I think there's an audience that actually really quite like him. And I'll admit, the only reason I watched Last Light is I want to see what Matthew Fox is doing in his new show.
Okay.
And apparently what he's doing in his new show is looking like he's either had some face work done or maybe it's just too much makeup. I can't work out what's going on there, but he looks a bit funny in this program.
Okay.
Yeah, but, like, everything in the show looks a bit funny. So I wouldn't necessarily read too much into how one actor's looking in this.
Was there something else you wanted to mention that you've been watching?
Not really. I mean, what I wanted to talk about this week is I want to talk about American Gigolo, and they were going to send me the screeners for it, and then it never happened. So
that's what was in our running sheet. Okay.
Yeah, my understanding is that the show is not particularly great. My understanding is that the show is fine, but the show is not really quite the spin-off of the movie American Gigolo as much as it is taking the brand name of it and a character name and then sort of putting in a show that's kind of like Ray Donovan 2022.
Okay.
But anyway, I haven't seen it, and I'll definitely have seen it by next week's show, so probably expect me to talk about it properly then.
I have been watching a couple of things. One that we covered on the podcast a little bit earlier. It's called Bad Sisters, and one that is on our national broadcast called Savage River. I want to weigh in very briefly on Bad Sisters. You gave it a bit of a poo-poo review because of the first episode. We've done all the episodes up to now, and I've got to say I'm hooked. It is very funny. It is very dark in places. Claes Bung, who plays one of the great villains on TV of recent times in this series, is just excruciating to watch, but so entertaining. And the interaction between the four actresses playing the bad sisters is just terrific. They're wonderful together. You've also got Daryl McCormack in there, the hot thing at the moment from Good Luck to You, Leo Grande, the film that's playing with Emma Thompson in cinemas. And
Sorry, you said it's playing in cinemas. I was looking at the Event Cinemas website today. It's down to one screening everywhere.
It's already, it's been a month. I guess that's okay. It was never going to be a Marvel-sized thing. But I'm going to say here and now...
There's still lots of sessions for Bullet Train.
And you heard it here on the Screen Watching podcast. Daryl McCormack will be the next James Bond. There you go. Sure. I am putting it there. You can date it and time it. I think that's going to happen. But anyway, we're right on board for Bad Sisters as the complexities of the murder mystery start to take shape and the back and forth in time is expertly handled. We're really enjoying Bad Sisters is what I'm saying, which is on... I don't know which platform it's on. It's
on Apple TV Plus.
Apple TV Plus. And I love Sharon Horgan, so that's worth watching.
What I will say about that is that I did only watch the first episode, and I kind of feel like life is too short to have to watch multiple episodes now to find something that I kind of like about a show, because I found nothing in that first episode I connected to.
It comes together, and I remember your review. I know you didn't like the funeral starting to it, and that sort of plays into that first episode. You hate things that start with a funeral. Cutting edge criticism from Dan Barrett.
It is such a tired device. It has been done so many times, and it's never as smart as the writers think it is.
It plays well into this series. The other one I want to mention very briefly, and I've only watched the first episode because it's all that's available, is Savage River, the new Australian TV drama. Jocelyn Moorhouse, one of our finest directors, she's directed this first episode, shot by Donald McAlpine, of all people, one of the great DOPs this country's ever seen. It is the story of a young woman who returns to the small country township of Savage River after a stint in prison. And all the people in the town know exactly who she is and the nature of the crime she was thought to have committed that sent her off to prison. So you've got this small town, dark secrets, moody millennial in the lead. It should feel more familiar than it is because it was quite sort of engaging and interesting for a first episode. They take a little while to set up all the characters. There's those sort of machinations you have to go through as a sort of to set up the origins of the story. I think it's going to unfold in a pretty interesting manner as it goes forward. One of our more high quality TV dramas of recent years. It's called Savage River on ABC and ABC iView.
Okay. Simon Foster, I think it's time to move on to... Oh, wait, we're saving the date for something. What are we saving?
We're going to save the date. Well, I know you'll be thrilled to know that September 13th, that's next Tuesday as we record this, the 2022 Emmy Awards from 10 a.m. here in Australia on Foxtel Arena and Foxtel On Demand, and then again at 8:30 in the evening. Are you at all sort of engaged by the Emmys this year, or so we'll just do a review next week? No,
I'm done with the award shows.
Okay, all right, fine, good.
I mean, the Emmy Awards especially make just... like the Emmys and the Oscars make far less sense the more that we start going down the route of this sort of premium TV world that we're in.
Don't disagree. Absolutely. No, that's fine.
Can I just talk? I mean, I've already talked about this on the podcast before, but I'm going to do it again.
Sure.
In the last weekend, we saw, well, not the current weekend we're on, but, last week, we saw two previous Emmy events take place. So all the craftspeople, the actual real people that work in Hollywood,
yes,
they had their non-televised awards. And as part of that, they gave away the award for the best TV movie of the year. It wasn't Coda, for example, which happened to win the Academy Award for best movie. Mm-hmm. Instead, it was Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers. And nothing to me speaks more about the problem that exists at the moment with these award shows not necessarily speaking to what the medium represents these days than that taking place.
That's kind of crazy, isn't it?
It really is.
Was that the actual category? The category was best movie on television, was it? And it was
television movie.
Wow. that's something happening behind the
But
scenes.
like in this day and age where all these streaming movies have huge budgets and prestige around them, obviously not all the movies, but they do have prestige plays that they make. Okay, like why are those movies not being nominated, except for the fact that if they nominate them for the Academy Awards, then they can't nominate them for the Emmys.
Yeah,
like it's just purely for the awards. It's not for the actual product that viewers are experiencing anymore. And that industry viewer split, I think, just completely sinks the entire endeavor these days.
Big words from Dan Barrett here on the Screen Watching Podcast. October 17 to...
So I was going to say, what's worth noting about the Emmy Awards this year is that the Emmy Awards are actually being held on a Monday night in the US, which is a Tuesday here in Australia, which is different to usual, where it's usually a Sunday night. And I think that's for reasons of a football game.
Oh, wow. Been bumped by sport again. That's just 3 mentions of sport we've had in this podcast. That's
because sport's the thing that drives viewership. The Emmys have a declining viewership dramatically. And there you go, where the money is.
Sport rules, baby. October 17 to 23, the Night of Horror Film Festival is back at Dendy Cinemas Newtown for its 14th edition. Well done, Night of Horror team. And on April 21, 2023, mark your calendars, Evil Dead Rise. Now, this one has dodged the axe that was wielded by the Warner bosses and has actually been bumped up to a cinema release after having originally been programmed for HBO Max. So that's kind of the exception that proves the rule with everything going on at Warner's at the moment. So April 21, 2023, The Evil Dead will rise in cinemas.
Well, it's actually, it's only the exception that sort of, breaks the rule, only because they've been looking at the films that they've been greenlighting for HBO Max and looking at the budget that it's sitting at. And I've been evaluating effectively what movies can we give a cinema push to? Because if they give it a cinema push, they've got to spend an extra like 10, 20, $30 million on advertising.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So where can they actually derive some profit? So they've decided that some of the movies they had made for HBO Max were too expensive to just have on streaming alone. It didn't make sense for their overall business structure. So films like Batgirl, for example, they looked at that saying, we can pump the extra money into it, but we're not going to be able to get any profits from it because the film just isn't going to play. Okay, but they've clearly looked at Evil Dead Rise and said, no, we think we can actually get some audience in the current marketplace.
Exciting stuff. Evil Dead Rise. Looking forward to it. Love it. Good Evil Dead film. This week in history, September 11, 1954, the first Miss America is broadcast on television. No, that didn't come out right. The first time Miss America is broadcast on television. 19-year-old Lee Merriweather is crowned the 27th Miss America. Now, where did she go on to great fame as?
Oh, look, Lee Merriweather's been famous for all sorts of reasons. I'd say that maybe her most famous role was playing the Lily Munster character in the New Munsters in the early 90s. Is that correct?
That is not correct. And I know you're dodging the actual
stab at it. It's probably for a movie that she started in 1966.
No, I don't think so.
Yes. Sorry, Simon. Are you going to try to correct me on this one?
No. I want to know. I mean, she was famous for playing a Batman villain. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, in the 1966 movie.
Oh,
Batman.
okay. There you go. All right. Okay. What was she? She was Catwoman.
So she played Catwoman in the movie.
She's one of the great.
And she didn't play Catwoman in the TV series at all. That was either Eartha Kitt in season 3 onwards or Julie Newmar in the prior 2 seasons. But Lee Merriweather did make an appearance on the Batman TV show, playing a character who I can't remember the actual name of the character, but it's actually one of the best episodes of the series. It kind of plays it like a fun 1960s screwball rom-com.
Wow, look at you
It's a very different Batman episode than most.
I knew once I scratched the Lee Merriweather surface that you would flow with Lee Merriweather trivia. Very pretty lady too. I'm not surprised she won.
Yeah.
September 12, 1972, Maud.
I've got this one.
Okay, sure.
Maud, which is a spin-off from All in a Family, starring one B. Arthur, premiered on CBS. That was September 12, 1972. Later that season, which would have happened in 1973, is the infamous Maud's Dilemma episode, a 2-part where she got an abortion. Now, with the current political Roe versus Wade overturning in the US recently, the Maud's Dilemma episode of Maud has become a hotly discussed topic because abortion has been depicted on television very infrequently. And so people are looking at this saying, well, we could talk about this in the 70s, but, we can't talk about it now. So a lot of TV producers are looking at that episode right now and seeing what they can do to try to emulator pretty much.
Has it had a rebroadcast? Have one of the networks sort of grabbed it and done it as a special screening or put it up on their website?
No one's put like more in primetime recently, but what you probably will see is there has been the live in front of a studio audience program, which has been recreating classic sitcoms from the Norman Lear catalog of sitcoms through the 70s. So they did All in the Family. They did Facts of Life. Yeah. Facts of Life and two others. I can't. The Jeffersons.
With the new young cast doing a live read.
With like younger and sort of, modern day like name talent around the place recreating these classic sitcoms using original scripts. Maud's Dilemma absolutely will be one that they do this year.
That's exciting. September 13, 1990, Law and Order, created by the great Dick Wolf, first premiered on NBC. My question to you, who played the two detectives and the ADA in episode 1?
Good question.
Yeah, I know, it's a good one, isn't it?
I don't think I can do this one.
The two detectives were played by Chris Noth, was one.
Yeah. I just assumed this is a bit of a trick question that Chris Noth wasn't there at the beginning.
Yeah, he was there at the beginning, Chris Noth. And the other one was played by George Zanza, who was a great character actor from the period. He starred in films like The Deer Hunter, Kevin Costner's No Way Out, The Beast, which I mentioned on the podcast last week. You'll have a look at George Zanza and you'll know him. And the ADA was played by one Michael Moriarty in the very first episode of that.
September 15, 1949, my friend. Lone Ranger premiered on ABC TV.
Now, I know you were alluding towards the question there. What does Kimosabi mean?
I just think it means friend, doesn't it?
Well, I thought that as well. Apparently, the Kimo part of it means friend. The Sabi part of it is a regional word for Apache. So it means friend of the Apaches.
Okay, it's good to know.
No, not happy birthday. No, not that. Please, no, not happy birthday.
September 11, 1979, Jurassic... Oh, sorry, there's a theme. Sorry, Simon, go for it.
Yes, you got to do now here on All Contest Podcasting. We're doing, what do all these have in common? Okay, do your thing where you read through them.
Okay, 11th September 1979, Ariana Richards, who I believe is the young girl from the Jurassic Park movies.
Boom, well done, excellent. September 12, 1954, the great Joey Pants, Joe Pantoliano, who starred or co-starred in a small role in Empire of the Sun. You see where this is going.
Okay. We've got, going by your typing here, Siot, 14, 1947. Sam Neill, star of Jurassic Park.
Jurassic Park. And September 15, 1958, Wendy Jo Sperber, who was in Bosom Buddies, but also had a small role in the aforementioned 1941. This week,
also probably best known, though, as Marty McFly's sister in Back to the Future.
Back to the Future, but it was being directed by Steven Spielberg, that all these birthday people have in common. So yes, she was produced, and Joey Pants was produced by Spielberg in The Goonies. We've had some response on our Facebook page that they were all in Spielberg films, but the preciseness, the specificity that we're looking for is they were all in films directed by Steven Spielberg. And that's the birthday quiz. And every week, go to our Facebook page and I'll put a new picture up, and you can spend your week wasting time and guessing what the birthday connections are. So happy birthday.
So I also wanted to mention that Wendy Jo Sperber was a cast member of I Want to Hold Your Hand, which I talked about earlier on the pod.
Also produced by Steven Spielberg.
And also probably worth mentioning is her role in 1986's Stewardess School.
Which Steven Spielberg had nothing to do with.
Are you sure about that?
No, I'm not, but I'm pretty certain.
Okay, Simon, this is people's favorite part of the podcast where we say goodbye. Folks, thank you very much for listening to Screen Watching. My name is Dan Barrett. You can find me on Twitter at the Dan Barrett. You can start your day with a free newsletter. I should mention it more often. It's called Always Be Watching. You can find it at alwaysbewatching.com. It covers the big stories in TV, streaming, and film. And on Fridays, I've got a bonus newsletter called Always Be Streaming. And that gives you a good old listing of the big TV shows that launched that very week.
I'm on the Twitter at Simon R. Foster1. I've got some fresh content up at screen-space.net. Do visit the Screen Watching Facebook page where you can play our birthday quiz, and check out the Screen Watching YouTube channel where there's lots of uncut interviews and occasionally fresh trailers, which I should do more often. Have you finished stretching?
Okay, you can follow screen. No, I was stretching. Not stretching like to, pad out this podcast, because I think people don't need that. But I think in terms of getting my body to where it needs to be to able to lift things and
well,
run
it's that
and
time. We're recording this very early in the morning, and our bodies are still sort of acclimatizing to life, being awake. So yes, we're stretching, getting our muscles pumping. Fit young men that
it's less early in the morning than it was when we started.
Anyway,
Anyways, folks, you can follow Screen Watching via your favorite podcast app. Load it up now and hit the follow button. Folks, I moved into a new house, so I've got to get off to Bunnings. Simon, I'm sure you've got a good weekend ahead as well.
Football weekend, all sport podcasting. Someone we're about to watch some NRL and some baseball as well. It's a very exciting time for us sports nuts. So thanks, Dan. Bye-bye.
Sorry, what does the N stand for?
In what?
NRL.
National Rugby League.
Okay, well, that answers my next two questions. Folks, we'll catch you next week.